Well, this is the last segment of the Exodus. We're going to get them in the promised land. And I would say they lived happily ever after. But if you've seen anything over these last 40 years as we've looked at this, you know that wasn't the case. But if you would like to know more, the Joshua Judges Ruth class is on our website, faithfulstewards.com, and you can follow along and see all the great things that happened once they got into the promised land. So this is entering into the promised land, and Miriam died in the first month of the 40th year. Aaron dies in month 5, and Moses will die in the 11th or 12th month. Moses announces to the children of Israel that he is going to die, and why, and he prays to God for a capable replacement. When it comes to his law, God is no respecter of persons. We open in Deuteronomy 4:20, but the Lord has taken you and brought you forth out of the iron furnace. And I had to stop and look at that because, that's a great figure of speech. He brought them out of Egypt, and he's describing Egypt like there was like being in an iron furnace. I don't know about you, but that's not a place I'd want to stay very long. So they'd been in there in this iron furnace, even out of Egypt, to be unto him a people of inheritance, as you are this day. Furthermore, the Lord was angry with me because of you guys, for your sakes. But it doesn't matter. He was guilty. They, got him to the point where he got angry and swore that I should not go over Jordan, that I should not go in unto that good land which the Lord thy God gives thee for an inheritance. But I must die in this land. I must not go over Jordan, but you shall go over, and you guys will be able to possess the good land. So take heed unto yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make you a graven image or the likeness of anything which the Lord thy God has forbidden thee. For the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God. The last 40 years, they saw a lot of evidence of that. So I must die in this land. But he's had a most amazing life. We go to Numbers 27, starting in verse 12 with the English Standard Version. We read, the Lord says to Moses, go up into this mountain of Abarim, see the land that I have given to the people of Israel. When you have seen it, you also shall be gathered to your people, as your brother Aaron was, because you rebelled against my word in the wilderness of Zin, when the congregation quarreled, failing to uphold me as holy at the waters before their eyes. And Moses spoke to the Lord and said, let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation, who shall go out before them and come in before them, who shall lead them out and bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord may not be as sheep that have no shepherd. This is at the end. Moses, what is he praying for? Oh, please, Lord, let me go. No. Moses asked God to specifically appoint a replacement for him who will actually lead them into the land of promise. God instructs Moses who to name, that he already had his spirit upon him, and to recognize him in front of all the people, so there would be an orderly transfer of power. He didn't hold a general election. God sets up a dictatorship. He did it with Moses. He's going to set it up with the next guy, Joshua. Verses 18 to 23, we continue English Standard Version.
So the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Make him stand before Eleazar the priest and all the congregation, and you shall commission him in their sight. You shall invest him with some of your authority, that all the congregation of the people of Israel may obey. And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire for him by the judgment of the Urim before the Lord. At his word they shall go out, and at his word they shall come in, both he and all the people of Israel with him, the whole congregation. And Moses did as the Lord commanded him. He took Joshua and made him stand before Eleazar the priest and the whole congregation. And he laid his hands upon him and commissioned him, as the Lord directed through Moses.
By utilizing Urim in front of all the people, it would signify to everybody there that Joshua was endorsed by God. That was God's choice. Now in Numbers 33, if you want to get an extensive overview of the journeys of the children of Israel, you got a map, or next time you're in Egypt and you want to see where they went all over the place, Exodus 33 lays it all out. But then we get down to verse 37, and what happens there?
And they removed from Kadesh and pitched in Mount Hor, in the edge of the land of Edom. And Aaron, the priest, went up into the Mount Hor at the commandment of the Lord, and died there, in the 40th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt, in the first day of the 5th month. And Aaron was 123 years old when he died in Mount Hor.
Mount Hor today is known as Jabal Haran, outside of Petra in Jordan. Verse 50, and the Lord spake unto Moses in the plains of Moab by Jordan near Jericho, and said, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when you are passed over Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall, absolutely, you need to do this, drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, destroy all their pictures, destroy all their molten images, and quite pluck down all their high places. And you shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land and dwell therein, for I have given you the land to possess it. You shall divide the land by lot, and that's where Urim and Thummim came in again too. So that was part of the lot for an inheritance among your families. And to the more you shall give, the more the inheritance. To the fewer, they get less land, less of an inheritance. Every man's inheritance shall be in the place where his lot falls. According to the tribes of your fathers, you shall inherit. But if you will not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall come to pass that those which you let remain of them shall be pricks in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and shall vex you in the land wherein you dwell. Moreover, it shall come to pass that I shall do unto you as I thought to do unto them. If you don't drive them out and you guys start, doing things that they teach you, what I was going to do to them is going to happen to you. Is God making that pretty plain? Yeah, he's going to do that about 5 times in this teaching. All right, so let's move on to Deuteronomy. Let's see. God has Moses issue another warning about the dangers of not utterly driving out the inhabitants of the land. They would be the cause of many problems, and God will enlarge on this in the book of Deuteronomy. So Deuteronomy 6. Bob? Bob's frozen. Hope Bob's not dead. All right. Deuteronomy 6:1. I'll go ahead and read it. Now, these are the commandments, the statutes or the rules, and the judgments, which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land whither you go to possess it, that thou mightest fear the Lord thy God, to keep all his statutes and all his commandments, which I command thee. You, your son, your son's sons, all the days of your life. Why? That your days may be prolonged. Hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful. Observe to do it. Make sure you do it, that it may be well with thee, and that you may increase mightily, as the Lord God of thy fathers has promised thee in the land that flows with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, by the way, the Lord our God is one Lord. Jesus quotes this verse in Mark 12:29. The concept of one God, as revealed to the early Hebrew patriarchs, was almost lost. The Hebrews were the only people with a clear idea of monotheism. Abraham was a true believer in one God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, who cares for his people. During their stay in Egypt, the Israelites had seen the Egyptians and other nations have many gods. In those days, people thought that the more gods a nation had, the stronger, more prosperous it was. Remember the Apostle Paul walking into Athens? There's just one statue after another, after just the whole. It got to the point where we got too many gods. Anybody else brings up a god, we're going to put them to death. So, but hey, the more gods you had, the better you were. And each deity presided over a certain thing. There were gods who could control the sun and the rain, gods who had authority over the night, even gods who had authority over death. The concept of one God was foreign to other nations, let alone an invisible God. There was no statue to be made for the true God either. God had been nearer to the Israelites than any other people. He had led them, he had favored them. They'd even heard his voice and lived. Therefore, the people were admonished to not forget the covenant and the laws that God had given them. And if they did, then they would be scattered among all the nations, which means, I can just say the Babylonian captivity and what the Assyrians did. And there's the explanation. So where are we at? Verse 5, Bob.
And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes. And thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates.
Yeah, you're supposed to put nice pictures, put them in picture frames, put them all over your house so you got the word in front of you. Frontlets or phylacteries were worn by Pharisees in the gospel period. They were little boxes, with scriptures in it that was strapped across one's forehead, or be between their eyes. So they kept the word between their eyes. They would also wear them on their wrists, so it'd stay in front of them. This custom stems from this section of literally trying to keep God's word always before their faces. And that's always a good children's fellowship idea. Have them, put a little scripture together in a little box and then have them make phylacteries. So, all right, verse 10. And it shall be when the Lord thy God shall have brought thee into the land which he swore unto the fathers, he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give thee great and goodly cities which you didn't build not. You just walk in and take them. You get houses full of good things, which you didn't fill them up. You got wells, they're already dug for you. You didn't have to dig them. You didn't have to plant vineyards or olive trees, which thou shalt have eaten and be full. They're all there for you. Then, once you get all of this, beware. Why does God have to keep telling him this? Beware, lest thou forget the Lord, which brought thee forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Thou shalt fear the Lord thy God. You should serve him. You shall swear by his name. You shall not go after other gods. Don't go after the gods of the people which are round about you. For the Lord thy God's a jealous God among you, lest the anger of the Lord thy God be kindled against thee, and destroy you from off the face of the earth. You shall not tempt. You shall not put God to the test by questioning Jehovah's presence and his ability to meet needs. That's what got, Moses in trouble there. The Lord, don't do that to the Lord your God like you tempted him in Massa. Instead, you shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God. Keep his testimonials, keep his statutes, which he has commanded thee. And if you do that, and thou shalt do that which is right, and do that which is good in the sight of the Lord, that it may be well with thee. Many of us have had children and still have them, I guess. But we sit them down and try and talk to them about, hey, if you want things to go well, you might want to heed what I have to say. Of course, many times they don't, but anyway. And that thou mayest go in and possess this good land which the Lord swore unto the fathers, to cast out thy enemies from before thee, as the Lord has spoken. See, God was not jealous of pagan images and idols. They're not gods. He was zealous to keep his people on the right path, prevent them from following after false and dangerous deities, whose worship was based on immoral practices and sensualities. God is zealous to protect, guide, and lead those who trust in him. There's no one greater than him to be jealous of. Deuteronomy 7, verses 6 through 10.
For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people, as his treasured possession, unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love upon you, nor choose you, because you were more in number than any people, for ye were the fewest of all people, but because the Lord loved you, and because he would keep the oath which he had sworn unto your fathers, hath the Lord brought you out with a mighty hand, and redeemed you out of the house of bondmen from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know therefore that the Lord thy God, he is God, the faithful God, which keepeth covenant and mercy, steadfast love, with them that love him, and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations, and repayeth them that hate him to their face, to destroy them. He will not be slack to him that hateth him. He will repay him to his face.
That's kind of part of our hope, but God chose them as treasured possession because he loved them and he had made an oath to their fathers. It was not because they were the greatest people, but they were Abraham's descendants. Deuteronomy 8. Let's see if there's something different that comes up. All the commandments which I command thee this day shall you observe to do. Why? That you may live, that you may multiply, that you can go in and possess the land which the Lord swore unto your fathers. And then thou shalt remember all the way that the Lord thy God led thee these 40 years in the wilderness, to humble thee, to prove thee, to know what was in your heart, whether thou would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled thee. He suffered thee, allowed you to get hungry, and then he fed you with manna for 40 years, which you didn't know what that was. Neither did your fathers know. Why? That he might make thee know that man does not live by bread only, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of the Lord does man live. Your clothing, it didn't get old, it didn't get out of style. Neither did your foot swell, even though you were in the desert for 40 years. Thou shalt also consider in your heart that as a man chastens or disciplines his son, so the Lord thy God chastens or disciplined you. Of course, that comes up in Hebrews 12, 5 and 6. Therefore, thou shalt keep the commandments of Lord thy God, to walk in his ways, to fear him. For the Lord thy God brings thee into a good land. Now, if you want to buy a land, a good land, if you're looking to buy land, here's what God thinks is a good land. Here's his description of it. A land of brooks of water, of fountains, depths that spring out of valleys and hills. A land of wheat, barley, vine, fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, honey. A land wherein thou shalt eat bread without scarceness. Thou shalt not lack anything in it. Right? A land whose stones are iron, and out of the hills you're going to be able to dig copper. When thou hast eaten and you're full, then you settle back, pat your stomach, and say, you bless the Lord thy God for the good land which he gives thee. They've been living in a desert. That's not a good land. You guys will get there, all this great stuff will be there, and you can just give thanks to God. But beware that thou forget not the Lord thy God, in not keeping his commandments, his judgments, and his statutes, which I command thee this day. God took care of his people throughout the whole 40 years of wandering in the desert. He had met every need. Then he describes what a good land consisted of: plenty of water, found in many forms, brooks, springs, fountains, a land where many varieties of crops would grow and be harvested. Also a land with valuable, useful minerals like, iron and copper and cobalt. It's iron and copper back then, which were needed for structural growth and weapons for protection. Deuteronomy 18, 9 through 14, NIV.
When you enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nations there. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritualist, a wizard, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. Because of these same detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you. You must be blameless before the Lord your God. The nations you will listen to those who practice sorcery or divination. But as for you, the Lord your God has not permitted you to do so.
Right. You're going to dispossess the people that live there. They're going to you're going to drive them out from their homes, and you're going to just march right in. Which bedroom would you like, kids? Just go in and take it all. When they came into the land, if they would utterly drive out the inhabitants of the land, then they could not learn from them the evil, detestable spiritual practices of those whose land they were going to be occupying. If there was nobody there to teach you wrong practice, then it would never come up, would it? That's why he said, get rid of them, get them out of the land. Verse 15. Now he's going to move into another very important subject. The Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me. Unto him you shall hearken, according to all that thou desires of the Lord thy God in Horeb in the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, neither let me see the great fire anymore, that I die not. Remember, God got them all together, started speaking to them, and they all kind of like, Moses, you talk to God. You do that. That's a little too much for us. The special effects, we can't handle it. And the Lord said to me, they have well spoken that which they have spoken. I will raise them up a prophet from among their brethren, like unto you, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak unto them all that I shall command him. It shall come to pass that whosoever will not hearken unto my words, which he shall speak in my name, I will require it of him. I will judge them by my word. But the prophet which shall presume to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or that shall speak in the name of other gods, even that prophet shall die. And if thou say in thy heart, how shall we know the word which the Lord hath not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing follow not, nor come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord has not spoken. But the prophet has spoken it presumptuously. Thou shalt not be afraid of him. Moses predicted the rise of a great prophet like himself, who would reveal the inner meaning of the law and the prophets. This prophet was to be sent by God in the fullness of time, would rise up from among the people, and the prophet was to proclaim the Lord's highest revelation and to cause the light of God to shine upon other races and people. This prophet was the Lord Jesus Christ. It was the Messiah. It was the anointed one. He would be the greatest prophet since Moses. An ordinance warning against false prophets is also issued here. Israel at times was misled by false prophets, seeking their own glory and fortune by saying and acting as if they were the spokesman for God. Well, gee, the same thing's true today. There are many false prophets saying, God said this, God said that. Sell everything, give your money to me. Come live in my giant commune. They're constantly doing things that we know isn't true. So basically, Deuteronomy 20, verse 1. When thou goes out to battle against the enemies, what does this mean? They're going to have to battle once they get into the promised land. And if you see horses and chariots, and if you see a people more than you, be not afraid of them. For the Lord thy God is with thee, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And it shall be, when you are come near unto the battle, that the priest shall approach and speak unto the people. So, at the beginning of the Braveheart movie, when he gets them all, or in the middle of it, when he gets them all together, he gives the speech. Nobody's going to die here tonight. We're going after these guys. Well, the priest is supposed to give that kind of a speech. And shall say unto them, listen, Israel, you approach this day unto battle against your enemies. Let not your hearts faint. Fear not. Do not tremble. Don't be terrified because there's more of them. For the Lord your God is he that goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to save you. So that was the priest's job, to get them ready to go and remind them. The priests were given the task of reminding the troops before a major battle to have no fear, because God went with them to fight against their enemies to ensure victory. Deuteronomy 25:17. Now, remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way, when you were come forth out of Egypt, how he met thee by the way, and he smote the hindmost of thee, even all that were feeble behind you, when you were faint and weary, and he feared not God. Therefore it shall be, when the Lord thy God has given thee rest from all thy enemies round about, in the land which the Lord thy God gives thee for an inheritance to possess it, once you're all settled in, that thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Don't forget it. God chooses to remind them that when they were settled in the promised land, that they were to war against Amalek and to utterly wipe them out for the way they treated Israel as they came forth from Egypt. This is why Samuel, once everything got settled, Samuel commissioned Saul to utterly destroy Amalek and to utterly destroy everything that belonged to them. All right, 1 Samuel 15, 1-3. Got that, Bob? You're muted, Bob.
Sorry. Samuel also said unto Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint thee to be king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore hearken unto the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not. But slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass.
Did Samuel, I mean, does anybody not understand what Samuel told him to do? But if you read the rest of this chapter, you know that's not what he did. I don't know. He might have been the good children of Israel from the Egypt days. All right. Deuteronomy 28 is known for the blessing and the curses of the law. Unfortunately, we're only going to see 14 verses of blessing, and there's like 80 verses of cursing. All right. If Israel listens to God, none of the curses of Egypt would fall upon them. God would ensure that they would just prosper. So we go to the New International Version, chapter 28. We'll start verse 1. If you fully obey the Lord your God, and if you carefully follow all his commands I give you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all nations on earth. All these blessings will come on you, and they'll overtake you if you just obey the Lord your God. You'll be blessed in the city. You'll be blessed in the country or out in the field. The fruit of your womb will be blessed. The crops of your land, the young of your livestock, the calves of your herds, the lambs of your flock, your basket and your kneading bowls. They're all going to be blessed. You'll be blessed when you come in. You'll be blessed when you go out. The Lord will grant. He'll cause the enemies who rise up against you. They will all be defeated. They will come at you from one direction, and they'll run away in 7 directions. The Lord will send a blessing on your barns, on everything you put in your hand to do. The Lord your God will bless you in the land he's giving you. The Lord will establish you as his holy people, as he promised you an oath. If you keep the commands of the Lord your God and walk in obedience to him, then all the people on earth will see that you are called by the name of the Lord, and they'll be afraid of you. They'll be afraid of you because of the God that's taken such good care of all of them, all of you. The Lord will grant you abundant prosperity in the fruit of your womb, the young of your livestock, the crops of your ground, in the land he swore to your ancestors to give you. The Lord will open the heavens, the storehouse of his bounty, the storehouse of his good treasury. He'll send rain on your land in season, and to bless all the work of your hands. You will lend to many nations, but you won't need to borrow from anybody, from any of those nations. The Lord will make you the head. You won't be the tail. If you pay attention to the commands of the Lord your God that I give you this day, and if you carefully follow them, you will always be at the top, never at the bottom. Do not turn aside from any of the commands I give you today. Don't go to the right. Don't go to the left. Don't follow other gods. Don't serve them. These are the blessings from God, which they would receive if they stayed faithful to him, the one true God. Next, God's going to state the curses that they will receive if they do not stay faithful to obeying him, and if they start chasing after other gods. And these curses are not pretty. We're going into the X-rated section, or at least, parental guidance section of this teaching here. So, verse 15. However, if you do not obey the Lord your God, and if you do not carefully follow all his commands and decrees I'm giving you today, all these curses will come on you, and they will overtake you. You will be, remember it said you'll be blessed in the city? Oh, not anymore. You'll be cursed in the city. You'll be cursed out in the field. Your basket and your kneading trough, they're going to be cursed. The fruit of your womb will be cursed. The crops of your land, the calves of your herd, the lambs of your flocks. You will be cursed when you come in. You'll be cursed when you go out. The Lord will send you on your curses, confusion, and frustrations, and everything you put your hand to, until you are destroyed and you come to sudden ruin because of the evil you have done in forsaking him. The Lord will plague you with diseases until he has destroyed you from the land that you're entering to possess. The Lord will strike you with wasting disease, with fever, with inflammation, with scorching heat, with drought, with blight, with mildew, which will plague you until you perish. The sky over your head will be bronze. It won't be clear blue. The ground beneath you that you're trying to grow crops in will be like iron. The Lord will turn the rain of your country into dust and powder. It will come down from the skies until you are destroyed. The Lord will cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You will come at them from one direction, but you're the ones that are going to fly in 7 directions, or flee in 7 directions. And you will become a thing of horror to all the kingdoms on earth. Your dead body, your carcasses will be food for all the birds and the wild animals. There will be no one to frighten them away. The Lord will afflict you with the boils of Egypt, with tumors, festering scabs and sores, and you'll get, my God, the itch from which you cannot be cured. The Lord will afflict you with madness, blindness, confusion of mind. At midday, you will grope about like a blind person in the dark. You will be unsuccessful in everything you do. Day after day, you'll be oppressed and robbed, and no one's going to be here to help you or rescue you. Now it continues for another 39 verses. I figured this kind of gives you a bad enough thing. It keeps getting worse. You know, the next verse is terrible. So for 39 more verses, you get terrifying consequences in every aspect of your life. Now, once they have been warned, if they disobey, they are going to kill themselves. It's not God's fault. God has Moses clearly state to the Israelites the choice before he dies. Even if they walk away from God, they can return to him, and he will return to them great blessings. Deuteronomy chapter 30, 1-3, English Standard Version.
And when all these things come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you call them to mind among all the nations where the Lord your God has driven you, and return to the Lord your God, you and your children, and obey his voice in all that I command you today, with all your heart and with all your soul, then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes and have mercy on you, and he will gather you again from all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you.
And then this famous segment where he's going to set life and death before them, and he's going to challenge them to choose life so that they could live. All right, pick it up in verse 11, Bob.
For this commandment that I command you today is not too hard for you, neither is it far off. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will ascend to heaven for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it? But the word is very near to you. It is in your mouth and in your heart, so that you can do it. See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you today, by loving the Lord your God, by walking in his ways, and by keeping his commandments and his statutes and rules, then you shall live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. But if your heart turns away and you will not hear, but are drawn away to worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall surely perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are going over the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore, choose life, that you and your offspring may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying his voice, and holding fast to him. For he is your life and length of days, that you may dwell in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give them.
God has Moses exhort the children of Israel one last time to stay faithful to the true God by utterly destroying the inhabitants of the lands and utterly destroying their idols. Deuteronomy 31, verse 1, English Standard Version. So Moses continued to speak these words to all Israel. And he said unto them, I'm 120 years old today. He's 120 years old today. I am no longer able to go out and come in. The Lord said unto me, you shall not go over this Jordan. The Lord your God himself will go over before you. He will destroy these nations before you, so that you shall dispossess them, and Joshua will go over at the head, as the Lord has spoken. The Lord will do to them as he did to Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites, and to their land, when he destroyed them. The Lord will give them over to you, and you shall do to them according to the whole commandment that I have commanded you. And look, be strong and courageous. This is kind of going to be the theme to Joshua here. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you. He will not forsake you. Then Moses summons Joshua. Joshua is the young man who's been with him. Moses is 120. Joshua is 93 years old right now. And he said to him, in the sight of all Israel, be strong and courageous, for you shall go up with this people in the land that the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them, and you shall put them in possession of it. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you. He will not forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. How many times have we heard those in manifestations? Thus, there left no doubt as to who the next leader of God's people was to be. Then he has the law read to all the people. Verse 9.
Then Moses wrote this law and gave it to the priests, the sons of Levi, who carried the ark and the covenant of the Lord, and to all the elders of Israel. And Moses commanded them, at the end of every 7 years, at the set time in the year of release, at the Feast of Booths, when all Israel come to appear before the Lord your God at the place that he will choose, you shall read this law before all Israel in their hearing. Assemble the people, men, women, and little ones, and the sojourner within your towns, that they may hear and learn to fear the Lord your God, and be careful to do all the words of this law, and that their children who have not known it may hear and learn to fear the Lord your God, as long as you live in the land that you are going over the Jordan to possess.
Keep reading the law. Keep teaching the law. Your children need to know it, learn it, so they can live too. Moses, even though he knew that his days were numbered, that he was going to die soon, that God had told him he was not going to step in the promised land, he still delivered with full force what God had told him to say. Verse 14, and the Lord said to Moses, behold, the days approach that thou must die. Call Joshua, present yourself in the tabernacle of the congregation, that I may give him a charge. Moses and Joshua went, presented themselves in the tabernacle of the congregation, and the Lord appeared in the tabernacle in a pillar of cloud, and the pillar of the cloud stood over the door of the tabernacle. And the Lord said to Moses, behold, thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, and this people will rise up and go whoring after the gods of the strangers of the land. Well, wait a minute. That's not what Moses needed to hear. This is God saying that something they're absolutely going to do. You're going to die. You're going to sleep with your fathers. And you know what the people are going to do once you're gone? They're going to rise up and go whoring after the gods of the strangers of the land, whither they go to be among them, and will forsake me. They're going to break my covenant, which I have made with them. Then my anger shall be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them. And I will hide my face from them, and they shall be devoured. And many evils and troubles shall befall them, so that they will say in that day, are not these evils come upon us because our God is not among us? And I will surely hide my face in that day for all the evils which they shall have wrought, in that they are turned unto other gods. Now, here's the answer. I want you to write a song for me. I'm going to give you the words to the song. Write ye this song, and then teach it to the children of Israel. Put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the children of Israel. For when I shall have brought them into the land which I swore unto their fathers, a land that flows with milk and honey, and they shall have eaten and filled themselves and waxen fat, then will they turn on other gods, then they will serve them, then they will despise me, and they're going to break my covenant. Now, the good news is that didn't happen in Joshua's time frame. Joshua leads them in. They take a lot of it. They don't get all the land, but they do chase out 31 different nations. And all this generation, they stayed faithful to the one true God. It was their children that started hoarding after other gods and doing everything. So, and again, for more information on that, the Joshua Judges Ruth class is on my webpage at faithfulstewards.com. For Moses to hear that this was going to happen, God told him by revelation at the end of his life that the children of Israel would absolutely rebel against the true God. God, that had to be extremely sad and very disheartening. For 40 years, he dealt with them, and now he's going to die, and they're going to go into the promised land, and they are going to do exactly what this whole chapter we've been reading. Don't do it. All right, verse 21.
And it shall come to pass, when many evils and troubles are befallen them, that this song shall testify against them as a witness. For it shall not be forgotten out of the mouths of their seed. For I know their imagination, which they go about even now, before I have brought them into the land which I swear. Moses therefore wrote this song the same day, and taught it the children of Israel. And he gave Joshua the son of Nun a charge, and said, Be strong and of a good courage, for thou shalt bring the children of Israel into the land which I swear unto them, and I will be with thee. And it came to pass, when Moses had made an end of writing the words of this law in a book until they were finished, that Moses commanded the Levites, which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, saying, Take this book of the law, Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, and put it in the side of the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be there for a witness against thee.
God is protecting his written word. He's taken the Pentateuch, the first 5 books, and he's putting it into the ark so it will stay there so they can read it to everybody every 7 years. God is protecting his written word so future generations will be able to listen to his word in order to do it, so they could receive the blessings that God has available. Verse 27, we now read, For I know, and when God says I know, he knows. I know thy rebellion and the stubbornness, the stiff-necked, stubborn people. Behold, while I'm yet alive with you this day, you have been, this is Moses, basically God's telling them what's going to happen. So you have been rebellious against the Lord. How much more after my death? Gather unto me all the elders of your tribes, bring in your officers, that I may speak these words in their ears. And I'm going to call heaven and earth to record against them, for I know that after my death, you will utterly corrupt yourselves. You will turn aside from the way which I have commanded you. Evil will befall you in the latter days, because you will do evil in the sight of the Lord. You will provoke him to anger. Why? Through the work of your own hands. And Moses spake in the ears of all the congregation of Israel the words of the song until they were ended. So if you want to read the song, it's in chapter 32. And chapter 33 covers the blessing Moses has for each individual tribes of Israel, like Joseph did. I don't want to take the time to put them all in there, but chapter 33 goes through all of them, and he talks about the blessings for each of them. And we move on now to 33 verse, well, here's verse 1 that tells you what the whole chapter is, Bob.
This is the blessing with which Moses, the man of God, blessed the people of Israel before his death.
So that's what the whole chapter is. And now it's time for the death of Moses. Next to the Apostle Paul, the greatest revelation received by a man was Moses. And God probably missed the relationship that they had. They were friends. They talked face to face. God would make known his ways. We do not read of Joshua communing with God at the tabernacle like Moses had. The pillar of cloud was no longer needed. They've reached their destination. They're getting ready to go into the promised land. But when you think of it, God gets lonely. And, he doesn't have a replacement for Moses quite right yet. Deuteronomy 34. Really not until David.
And Moses went up from the plains of Moab unto the mountain of Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, that is over against Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land of Gilead unto Dan, and all Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim, and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah unto the uttermost sea, and the south, and the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees unto Zoar. And the Lord said unto him, This is the land which I swear unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob, saying, I will give it unto thy seed. I have caused thee to see it with thine eyes, but thou shalt not go over thither.
This green land of milk and honey, with its brooks and foliage, must have looked much better to Moses than the rocky desert wasteland that they'd been living in for the last 40 years. Hey, guess where you get to live now? Look at this. It's green. There's water everywhere. No manna, though. Verse 5, so Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in a valley in the land. God buried him. Can you imagine if they knew where Moses was buried? Holy cow, they'd be charging admission. It'd be terrible. So God buried him in the valley of the land of Moab over against Beth Peor, but no man knows of his sepulchre, even unto this day. And Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was not dim, nor his natural force abated. And the children of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days. So the days of weeping and mourning for Moses were ended. And Joshua the son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands upon him. And the children of Israel hearkened unto him and did as the Lord commanded Moses. Joshua's long suit was one of wisdom. Boy, he'd need it. Verse 10, and there arose not a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. In all the signs and the wonders which the Lord sent him to do in the land of Egypt to Pharaoh, to all his servants, all his land, and in all that mighty hand and all that great terror which Moses showed in the sight of all Israel. Now, if you want a quick overview, Psalm 105 and 106 have an overview of what happened to the children of Israel from the time Moses came to rescue them to the safe passage in the promised land. So you get the cliff notes if you want to do that. So now we move to Joshua 3. Let's get them across the Jordan towards Jericho. 3:14.
And it came to pass when the people removed from their tents to pass over Jordan, and the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as they that bear the ark were come unto Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped in the brim of the water, for Jordan overflowed all his banks at the time of harvest, that the waters which came down from above stood and rose up upon a heap very far from the city of Adam, that is beside Zeraton. And those that came down toward the sea of the plain, even the salt sea, failed and were cut off. And the people passed over right against Jericho. And the priests that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of Jordan. And all the Israelites passed over on dry ground until all the people were passed clean over Jordan.
That's quite a way to make an entrance. The ark goes out, the water holds up, and it just keeps piling up, and then they just all walk by. After 40 years, the Exodus was over. They had finally made it into the land that God had promised unto Abraham as a nation. After circumcising the males which were born in the wilderness, they celebrated the Passover. Joshua 5:10, New International Version. On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover. The day after the Passover, that very day, they ate some of the produce of the land. They ate unleavened bread and roasted grain. And boy, I bet it tasted good. The manna stopped that day after they ate this food from the lamb. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites. But that year they ate of the produce of Canaan. A new era begins. Life in the promised land. They are camping in Canaan's happy land. But I mentioned Caleb and his attitude towards his inheritance. So I thought we would close by reading Joshua 14, starting in verse 6. Then the people of Judah came to Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, in Kadesh Barnea, concerning you and me? I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land. And I brought him word again as it was in my heart." This is how I saw it. "But my brothers who went up with me made the heart of the people melt. Yet I wholly followed the Lord thy God. And Moses swore in that day and said, Surely the land on which your foot has trodden shall be an inheritance for you and your children forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God. And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive just as he said, these 45 years since the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses, when Israel walked in the wilderness. For 45 years, I've been out in the desert when I could have been in this promised land. You other anyway. And now, behold, I'm 85 years old, and I'm just as strong today as I was in the day that Moses sent me. My strength now is my strength was then, for war, for going and coming. So now give me the hill country of which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard on that day how the Anakim, how the giants were there. There are three major families of giants still there, and with great fortified cities. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I will drive them out just like the Lord said. So Joshua blessed them, and he gave him Hebron. Go take it, Caleb, for an inheritance. Therefore, Hebron became the inheritance of Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, to this day. Why? Because he wholly followed the Lord, the God of Israel. In case you were wondering, the name of Hebron used to be, in your older maps, you might see that it was Kiriath Arba. And Arba was the greatest man among the Anakims. It was named after the greatest giant of all time. And guess what? Caleb took them all out, and the land had rest from war.